Hi, I'm David Judson, Editor-in-Chief at Stratfor. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jay Ogilvy, the co-founder of the Global Business Network, former professor at Yale and Williams, and a practitioner of a related discipline, scenario planning, much related to, and much different than the geopolitical forecasting that's at the center of what we do. Thanks for joining us, Jay.
My pleasure.
Yeah. What we're kind of up to today, we wanted to have a conversation about 2015 as we kind of expand the aperture and look for new ways to expand our thinking and our offering to our users and readers in the new year. We've kind of come around to a conversation with Jay, whose life's work has been around scenario planning, which is kind of a second cousin to what we do, as I mentioned. Can you kind of explain a bit on that, and then we can maybe contrast some of the...
We're working the same beat, the globe, and nothing less.
Right.
And we're coming at it dealing with a lot of the same variables, from economic growth rates to energy prices. You know, we're in the same sandbox. But the contrast between what Stratfor does and scenario planning is that a lot of your work looks for the convergent solution, the forecast, whereas scenario planning is divergent thinking. We're always asking, what if? I mean, there may be an official future, a preferred scenario, but we're always trying to keep our ear to the ground and our eyes open to the off-ramps from that preferred scenario.
Well, I mean, I think that, one of the things that our model, geopolitical theory, does certainly allow for, it's not dogmatic, and black swans do occur.
Yes.
And every year, in the next week or two, we'll be publishing our annual report card on what we got right, but also what we got wrong. So I think there's some intersections to what we do as well as points of diversion, and I'm kind of looking forward to exploring what those are.
And I think one of the main points of intersection is acknowledging that for almost every team you find in the C-suite, if you do enough interviews and scratch for the assumptions, you'll usually be able to identify what we would call not so much a forecast as an official future, what the future that is assumed in the C-suite. Your work is mostly devoted to reinforcing that certainty about where a company wants to go. Our work is largely about challenging that certainty and saying, well, what if things don't work out exactly as you expect them to? But in both cases, we've got to respect the facts. We've got to do the research. We've got to respect what we do know, in spite of what we don't.
Well, I think another point that I'll look forward as collaboration unfolds to exploring is, and we talk about this a lot internally, is the changing geo in geopolitics. And I'm not necessarily talking about climate change, although that's part of it. It's how urbanization changes certain imperatives and certain assumptions in the way that the pieces of the geopolitical model are put together. So maybe you could think about the geo a bit here.
Sure. Let's stretch out the geo to geography.
Right.
Okay. And acknowledge that the field of geography now is going through some changes, that you have people not just looking at the Earth kind of literally as the globe we see from space, or through the Mercator projections or the maps we have of countries with their boundaries. But there is a new kind of geography done by, for example, the massive 3 volumes by Manuel Castells called The Information Age, where he's saying, ye shall know them not just by their location on the globe, ye shall know them by their FedEx bills. Right. So he comes up with this concept that he calls the space of flows. and will still take a geographical perspective, but redefine the geography through this different lens of how many bits and bytes are flowing between which centers.
A little while ago, we were meeting with the analysts, and you used the phrase "seeing the world through many eyes," and the more screens through which you're peering at the world and its nature and its changing nature, the more accurate your forecast, your understanding in some becomes. Is that a accurate characterization?
And different scenarios. We were talking earlier about just sort of the differences from the point of view, well, you can take a geopolitical perspective, you can take a more economic perspective, you can take a more kind of almost Hegelian historical perspective of looking for megatrends. Those are different perspectives from a kind of sectoral point of view, but what we find when we build 3, 4 different stories about the next 10 years,
right.
Each of the stories will contain all of those sectors. It'll be the social, the political, the economic, the environmental. Each of those stories will contain all those perspectives, but because each of the stories is fundamentally different, one being, say, a success story, one being a failure story, one being an innovation story, one being a muddling through story, if you've got these stories at your disposal,
right,
you're able to see more. You're able to identify and recognize more in your horizon.
Well, I think in that spirit and exploring what we agree on and what we disagree on, we can have some interesting times in 2015 as we go ahead here, and we can come back in 2016 and sit here and see how we did. So, Happy New Year, Jay, and thank you very much for joining us here in Austin.
Thank you.